Shining Star. Written by Bluebird Lamentation. Read by Arashi. Unsurprisingly, she was back at it again. Kirumi had been working non-stop for several days. It was becoming apparent that she was unwilling to stop. Staying true to her nature, she acted like a warrior with a broom and tea tray, always on guard, always having a duty to serve. That thought just made the note Korekiyo was fiddling with in his hands even more strange. Would you like to spend some time together this weekend? I understand I have been neglecting you. Kirumi. Whilst he could argue that she was doing it for him, he still found it rather strange. Nevertheless, he found beauty in her kindness. All of humanity was beautiful to him, but Kirumi was a little part that just meant so much more. Smiling to himself, he remembered how he had responded to her note. He'd asked Shuichi to pass it on for him. They were all mutual friends, after all. That sounds truly wonderful. I would offer our standard tea date, but you need to take a break. I shall organize what we do. From your beloved, Korekiyo. Silently, he pondered as he kept holding the note. The date was tonight, but how had he come to get this far? He wasn't usually one to have nervous quirks. As he toyed with the note in his hands, he began to remember. Flittering in his stomach, butterflies carried him away to that eventful moment several months ago. They began to flutter more excitedly. Gently, a blonde-haired girl began to hit the keys, but before that, another blonde girl had caught his attention. Shuichi had been asking him endlessly to attend his girlfriend's piano recitals. Previously, he had politely declined due to the impending awkwardness that would follow as a result of accepting the invitation. He would have liked to observe the beauty music can bring to the world. At the price of watching all the flirting afterwards, it just didn't seem worth it. Until now. Shuichi must have explained Korekiyo's views, as this time, Kaede had brought a friend. At first glance, she was the pinnacle of beauty. Both of them had remembered performance etiquette and had brought some flowers for Kaede. Ordinarily, he'd be fixated on the flowers and their meanings, but he just couldn't take his eyes off the one holding them. "Good to meet you, Korekiyo," Kaede chirped enthusiastically, her violet eyes wide. "Shuichi tells me so much about you. This is Kirumi, a very close friend of mine. Hopefully you two get on." Kaede continued to smile widely as Shuichi began to rub the back of his neck. "Yeah, Kaede wanted our friends to meet each other for a while now, and she deemed this the perfect opportunity. Hopefully you two get on," he chuckled, shifting his glance around the room. Eagerly, Kaede slung an arm around him. "Relax, Shuichi. They'll be fine. Let's head out. I have to go and get ready. Bye-bye." She waved, dragging Shuichi off with her. Watching the two lovebirds run off, the two friends-to-be were stood facing each other. As the happy couple bounced along, Korekiyo was the first to initiate conversation. "Hello." In awe, Shuichi was happily being dragged away by the talented pianist. He chuckled as they continued walking, on their way to their seats. Kirumi responded, giving a small but polite smile. "Hello, how are you?" she asked, giving him a slight bow out of respect and habit. Taking a second, perhaps a second too long, he stood there and studied her. But not like an anthropology textbook or an event on culture. Fixed. His eyes were fixed on her, like nothing he'd ever seen or experienced before. Beautiful fair hair was like sand to the beach of her entire appearance. Soft as a feather, the hair gently fluttered down and made its way to cover her left eye. Interestingly, he did love a bit of mystery. He believed without a doubt that Kirumi would deliver. Due to her pale complexion, any slight hints of embarrassment would sneak its way onto her face and plaster itself over her porcelain cheeks. He had to stop himself from tittering at the thought. Glimmering green eyes were like gems in the crevices of her face. He wouldn't call himself infatuated. That's a lie. He absolutely would. The problem was hating to admit it. Snapping back to reality, he bowed in turn. "I am well, thank you. Yourself?" Watching her intently, he waited for her reply. A very small part of him wanted to touch her hands to examine how beautiful they were. His sensible mind quickly ruled that as an awful option. She responded with a simple nod. "I am well, thank you." Whether or not the interest was mutual, he would never easily find under her stoic mask. As it turned out, the mask wasn't that hard to break. All it would take was a few beverages. Once the recital was finished, they all met to congratulate Kaede. "How wonderful! Excellent work!" Kirumi gave her a slight grin and nodded. "Thanks, Kirumi!" She clapped, pleased to hear praise. Shuichi cast a glance at Korekiyo and caught him with a focused gaze on Kirumi, stifling his laughter. After giving Kaede a look, she returned it with a smug grin. Upon realizing it had quickly gone quiet, he took the chance to speak up. "I commend your efforts, Kaede. Excellent work." He turned half of his mouth into a smirk of approval. He noticed the two lovers looking at each other. Despite his curiosity, he was not one to ask questions. "How about we get some tea to celebrate? I shall pay for the drinks. It's my treat." She looked at the three others before her and gave each and every one of them a warm and gentle smile. Kaede's eyes twinkled brightly at the idea and began bouncing up and down again. "Absolutely, but I'll put some money in too. That's hardly fair." Korekiyo pondered the back and forth that ensued, knowing it will only end in some snide business from either woman. "How about this? I'll pay instead. That way there's no argument." If there's one part of humanity he struggled to find beauty in, it was hearing women bicker. Kaede backed down immediately, but Kirumi continued to protest. After a polite back and forth, she finally backed down as well. He liked that. She was willing to fight for herself, despite the underlying undertone of protecting others that he could easily detect. She was more likable by the minute. Stepping out of the bathroom, Korekiyo left the two sweethearts and Kirumi to chat amongst themselves. Momentarily, after he was considered out of earshot, they began to dig through Kirumi's thoughts. "So?" Kaede leant over the table, smirking proudly. "So what?" She tilted her head to the side, pondering her remark. "What do you think, silly? Korekiyo! I told you Shuichi would get you a cute guy, and trust me on this, he's interested." She giggled with her hand to her mouth. Baffled, Kirumi's fingers gently drifted towards her own mouth. As she was stunned into silence, Shuichi spoke up in Kirumi's place. "Yeah, normally he'd go on about the meaning of the flowers you were holding, or explain some kind of piano folklore, but he was quiet. Too quiet, even for him. You've piqued his interest. So, if he's piqued yours, please go for it." He gave her a tender smile and turned to Kaede, letting the other woman think in silence. How did she really feel? Of that she wasn't sure. He'd been kind, and seemed interesting enough. But was she really ready? Dedicating her entire life to her duty of helping others made finding love incredibly difficult. It was the classic question. Would she even know what to do? Holed up in different houses doing cleaning jobs didn't really make her a social person. It was a miracle she'd met Kaede in the first place. Would her sense of duty overtake the idea of being a lover? Would work consume her? All of these questions. But she left her number for him at the end of the day. Back to the paper in his hands, Korekiyo was filled with a warm and tingling feeling from that memory. It had been 3 months since then. They'd been on a few dates. Sparingly. Sure, she'd told him that she was busy. That didn't mean that he was barely going to see her. At least, that's what he thought. He hadn't seen her for about 3 weeks, and she'd hardly sent a hello back to his texts. It saddened him, really. However, he wanted to make this work. She was a wonderful woman. He wanted to show her that she wouldn't be abandoned due to her workaholic nature. Surprisingly, she'd made the first move. It was likely that she'd tried to research what you were supposed to do in a relationship, but tried to be unique. How cute. He appreciated her efforts to be authentic. Rather than a text, she'd sent him a romantic note. Classic. As he remembered that he'd sent one in turn, a text message came through with a quiet ding. "Kirumi, I have just received your note. Much appreciated. If you have something you would like to do, I will leave it in your hands. If you are doing it purely for my convenience, however, please do not go to such great lengths. I do not wish to trouble you, and would be happy to prepare something." She was always so formal. "Korekiyo, do not worry. I have something in mind. Even if I did not, you prepared the last date, and have been extremely busy. You deserve to rest. I shall see you later tonight." More messages followed, sorting out the place and time. Once all was agreed, he went to prepare. After all, he only had a few hours. Ding dong. Standing, Korekiyo found his way to the door and opened it with a smile. "Hello, Kirumi." He moved to let her enter and sat down. "Hello," she replied, sitting beside him. "How have you been?" she asked, almost too politely. Despite his date seeming fidgety, he cast a blind eye and responded, "I've been quite well. Would you like a drink or any other refreshments?" Noticing her pause and ponder, his eyes widened slightly. Ordinarily, she'd immediately offered to do it herself. Was she finally loosening up? Is that why she was uncomfortable? Trying to let go and let others do things she knows she can was no easy feat. If that was the case, "Yes, please. I appreciate your kindness. I'll have a cup of green tea, please." No way. Flabbergasted, Korekiyo silently nodded and left briefly. He appreciated her change in attitude, but what had happened to the woman from before? Regardless, he valued her newfound ability to be at some level of ease. Smiling slightly, he re-entered the room with 2 piping cups of tea and a large variety of snacks. He set them down on the table before them and turned on the television before them. What's all this?" she asked, looking at the food with intrigue. "I thought we could keep it simple. I wish for you to rest and relax for today. You've worked yourself far too hard." He sighed contentedly, flicking between the films. "Ah, so a movie date. I never took you as a casual person. Interesting." Leaning in closer, she was almost gazing at him. Peculiar, but he couldn't deny it was cute. "Yes, I'd suppose so," he replied as he brought himself back to reality. To him, she was like a whole other world, his best case study yet. This was one book he really wanted to see the end of. "I could say the same to you. You've been awfully relaxed. I can't say I have an issue with it, it's just odd. It's a wonderful side of you, though. It's just another beautiful part of you, and humanity." His eyes began to drift away from her and to around the room as a criminal dust of crimson crept onto his cheeks. Glancing back, it appeared that the same had happened to his date. Letting himself chuckle, the film began to play. Staring intently at the screen, he became lost in the incredible cinematic work. He cast an odd glance at his date to find her just as fixed, but she'd take a moment to look back and smile at him. Continuing to lose himself in the acting and plot, it wasn't until he felt a hand brush against his own that he came back to reality. His eyes moved to meet the hand upon his own, and felt his heart uncharacteristically pound in his tight chest. Warmth began seeping through his hand, and once again, the butterflies were fluttering. A true picture of beauty was painted before him. Drowsily, Kirumi had let her hand fall upon his own with a contented smile. Soon enough, her head was on his chest, and she was breathing calmly. He was so glad her eyes were half closed. Erupting into a blushing mess, Korekiyo's hand drifted towards her soft, sandy locks. She wouldn't mind, he figured, as he ran his slender fingers through it. Correct to his assumption, Kirumi began to quietly mumble. They were clearly murmurs of content. Carefully, he reached for a blanket and draped it over them before placing his gentle hands on her short hair. The unusual touchiness squeezed at his heart. Humanity truly was beautiful in a moment like this. As emerald green eyes fluttered shut, credits began to roll. It mattered not to him. They could continue to stay like this as long as they wished. Eyes drifting downwards, he took the rare opportunity to study her, just as he had upon their first meeting. The only difference? This time, he knows he's in love with her. As he continues to watch her, he can't help but lean down and let his long hair playfully tickle her forehead. He pressed a soft kiss to her forehead and watched as she snuggled closer. Like a small sun, she wiggled against him to find a comfortable position. She shone brightly and gave warmth to everyone she met. In this case, literally. As sleep began to overtake him, he whispered quietly in her ear, "You're my shining star, Kirumi. Thanks for all you do."